angles for riding on an off-road bike. I mean, that's road bike head angle. It was crazy. And the problem is that it exacerbated the problem almost, because although you ended up with the trail being about right, so that in real, like riding around a car park kind of riding, it felt okay. The moment you got any weight shift on that, the wheel kind of, instead of flopping over in a very floppy, oh dear, this is like a chopper kind of way, it did the opposite thing. It sort of tucked under, it went out from under you that way, because what you've done is basically put all your weight on the front wheel. Because to make it fit the rider, the handlebars are going to stay in the same place, the bottom bracket is going to stay in the same place, but you just steepen the head angle by 3 degrees. You move the front wheel 60 millimeters closer to you. So there's all this weight on the front wheel. And one of there's an equation, look it up on Wikipedia, there's an equation to do with wheel flop that basically says the more weight you put on the front wheel, the faster it happens. It's to do with the rate of change of the steering axis to the contact patch distance. So you had this thing where there was all this weight on it, and then this real kind of, because of this equation, you had this real quick rate of change of trail, and the bike would just come out from underneath you. So they got a pretty bad reputation for a while. What's happening now is that fork manufacturers are producing dedicated suspension forks with more offset, which means you can actually design it more like you would a 26-inch bike. It's still not quite enough in my opinion, because I've been playing around with 29er designs, and even with the fork offset that they're using, which is around 46 millimeters now, I still had to steepen up the head angle by a degree compared to the sole to get the trail in the same kind of area. And I think it needs to be much more. And I think people like Gary Fisher and Jeff Jones are on the right track there, because the Gary Fisher 29ers have got completely custom forks with a 51mm fork offset. And Jeff Jones, who makes these crazy space frame rigid bikes, which are just fabulous things to look at. He uses 55mm fork offset and a really slack head angle. But ride one of his bikes, and as much as I like my suspension and all my other modern niceties, it's an amazing handling bike. He's got it so right. So, although, like I say, although the suspension fork manufacturers have made it possible to design bikes perfectly nicely, I don't think they went far enough. But yeah, that's the basics of it. So when people say fork offset, then more fork offset equals twitchier handling, and vice versa. So that's what people are talking about when they're talking about fork offsets and trails and all that kind of thing when you're talking about different size wheel bikes. I'm going to take a breather and a bit of water here, because here comes a rant.